it really gives me a great honor and such joy to be able to invite Raj, the managing partner of CnetG Asia and a member of the 30% steering committee, to moderate the next panel. Raj is a long-standing champion of equality, that's for sure. And I first met him on a panel on inclusion, Raj. Do you remember? It was an exciting conversation, and I'm looking forward to the same now. What I'd like to say about Raj and a lot of our male allies is that really without them, this is going to be impossible. This aim of ours to get to parity even maybe, or at least 30% or some kind of recognition of our contribution is going to be impossible without our male allies. And Raj, over to you, and I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Farah, for the kind words, and thank you, Dato Amy, for getting the runway heated up and inviting more exciting discussions and questions around the topic of DEI. Once again, thank you for the introduction. And today we are really fortunate to have with us two highly distinguished panelists. Both of them are leading high-profile financial institutions. Very accomplished in their own ways. If Dato Amy started the panel discussion with unpacking DEI, we will continue the discussion which I've titled Raising the Bar from Equity to Equality. It's about how to accelerate for the point of unpacking what is next. And today we are very fortunate to have Dato Amirul Feisal Zahir, Managing Director of Khazanah Nasional, Dr. Hasnita, Dr. Hashim, Independent Non-Executive Director, Maybank, Chair, Maybank Investment Group. And this discussion will be divided into three segments, starting off with DEI itself, following with the role of board, and specifically Khazanah's focus, and finally landing with their personal opinion and on leadership traits. Now, the first question I would like to welcome Dr. Hasnita. DEI used to be just the language of human resource a decade ago in Malaysia. We have been discussing these in our roundtable since 2001, but I think, if I still remember, since the inception of Talent Corp, there was more discussions on career comeback women, making the workforce or the workplace more inclusive for women. But then it has evolved into generally all dimensions of diversity. Today, it has evolved into a business imperative as the right thing to do, not just a nice thing to do. What are the catalysts that are providing this push to DEI in organizations, Dr. Hasnita?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Raj, for the introduction, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me, especially Dato Amy. I think there are many reasons why DEI is important for organizations. We heard some figures quoted by Dato Amy. There's definitely a very significant correlation between diverse leadership teams and financial performance. Companies on the top quartile for gender diversity on executive teams were 21% more likely to perform on profitability, and 27% more likely to have superior value creation. But it's not just about gender. Companies in the top quartile for ethnic and cultural diversity on executive teams were 33% more likely to have industry-leading profitability. This is according to a McKinsey report. So it's clear that DEI and financial performance are related. That's not the only catalyst. The second one is legislation. There was a question in the earlier session whether we have laws. Maybe we don't have yet in Malaysia, but in other countries, there are legislations. For example, in the UK, there is a UK gender pay gap from 2017, which makes it mandatory for gender pay gap reporting, requiring public disclosure of overall mean and median gender pay gaps across the workforce for companies with more than 250 employees. In South Africa, for example, the broad-based Black Economic Empowerment Act includes incentive schemes to support Black-owned and managed enterprises. So financial regulators are already pursuing disclosure rules in certain countries. Even NASDAQ requires DEI reporting. Certainly, strong DEI within a company can positively affect decision-making, levels of employee engagement, and access to untapped markets. It can also increase innovation. One study found that companies with more diverse management teams have 19% higher revenues due to innovation. That is significant. Obviously, DEI can strengthen a company's ability to recruit and retain employees. Shifting demographics show that 47% of millennials are actively looking for diversity in the workplace. But we need to take care that these benefits can be fully realized, because only when inclusion is part of our culture that guarantees performance. Diversity alone does not guarantee performance, because the employees must have a positive experience. They can then be more productive, creative, and lead to greater attendance at work. Finally, I would say that many stakeholders, including shareholders and investors, are showing more interest to how the investee companies are addressing DEI in their own organizations.
Thank you, Dr. Hasnita. Now, I've borrowed few points that you mentioned. One is definitely gender pay gap and gender pay disclosures legislations in Europe. Do you see that coming soon to our shores? How do you think companies will respond to that in terms of making pay disclosures, compensation disclosures?
You mean legislation?
Yep.
Or just general companies?
General, the attitude, the approach towards requiring them to disclose their gender pay gap or salaries by positions.
Yeah, I don't know about other companies, but I can talk. What Maybank has done. I think Maybank tries to maintain pay equity for all employees with regard to gender and ethnicity, and aim to narrow any pay gap disparities. I think having open discussions at the NRC, the Nomination and Remuneration Committee level, in terms of pay gaps, in terms of how promotions are done, and so on, is a positive thing, and be very open about it. Yeah.
Interesting. And from your work around this area, gender pay gap, what do you think actually caused the gap in the first place? What kind of past historical traction happened that causes the pay gap between genders?
I think one is women advocating on their own behalf. Because women tend to do a lot more than what is required, and some of these things are not recognized in terms of performance measurement. So for example, taking care of the well-being of their colleagues or their employees, these things take time and can spread them thin, but these are not considered part of the performance indicators. So that could be one reason, just using your voice and standing up for yourself.
Okay, thank you for that. And now to Dato Amirul for the next question, Feisal. Khazanah's primary role is to build economic competitiveness by investing in key strategic developments and ensure that they're sustainable. Why DEI has taken a center stage now?
Thanks for that, Raj. I wouldn't say that it's taken a center stage now. When you actually look at the journey of Khazanah, I think there's a lot of things that Khazanah started many years ago, whether it's sustainability, before we even called it ESG or whatever it is, right? It's because we were doing the right thing with regard to environment, with regard to social aspects, with regard to DEI, and all the rest. I think why you might say it's now is because we're only making ourselves transparent in terms of what we require of our investee companies. Why I say that is because at the end of last year, we came up with a shareholder expectation. We came up with sustainability framework where we actually stated a few things, especially when it comes to DEI, where we would expect our investee companies to adopt. A good example would be, we mentioned about 30% of the board and senior management would like to see our investee companies to have at least 30%. And we also make it transparent in our voting guidelines, and this is something that we publish, you can get it from our website, that by 2025, we would expect that they achieve 30% or at least have a concrete plan. Because if not, then if the chairperson or the chairperson of the NRC, we would at that time vote against them, against a re-election, if those companies haven't achieved or do not have a concrete plan to achieve it. So again, I think what you're saying is, it's not now, we've been doing it all this while, but what we are doing right now is making ourselves transparent so everyone understands what our expectations are.
Interesting. Now, but how do you draw the balance between investee company performance versus this focus on DEI?
Right.
When push comes to shove, profitability has to be there, development has to be driven. How would you then strike a balance between driving performance of your investee companies versus the focus on DEI?
Well, you've heard Dr. Hasnita, we've heard Dato Amy mention statistics, right? Mention statistics about how DEI actually promotes it. I think from my perspective, and I think from our perspective, even here as an investor, I think it's very simple. Why I say it's very simple is because companies and corporates, they have to produce a service or product which is something that their customers demand, something that suits their customers. And very rarely do corporates have a single gender customer. I mean, True Fit and Hill, yes, but that's only one, right? But when you look at our investee companies, the customers that they serve are diverse. So to be able to produce a service and product to serve the customer, you have to be able to, have a team that actually understands it. And the team is basically your senior management. The team would be the workforce as well. They need to understand what products and services actually suit their customers. So that's why it's very simple. It's basically making sure that we have the right people to serve our customers. And that's simple as that. Now, that's something which is serving the customer. The other aspect, which we've heard through various people on this panel, is a talent pool. Now, what we're after is to be able to make sure that our talent, we tap the best talent, and we make sure that they perform to their optimal capability. Now, DOSM, and I read the statistic, in Malaysia, 62% of undergraduates are women, right? So, naturally, when you want to get the best talent, you are going to have a diverse set of talent. And of course, the last thing I think would be the diversity of thought. Let the best ideas win, but that best idea comes from a diverse point of view. Diversity of thought avoids, like a groupthink. It's quite necessary in terms of any business decision to actually have that. So when I look at it in terms of the value and why it makes a lot of sense is because we have to equip our companies to be ready to serve the customers in the right way. So DEI is not just about, I think Kishore mentioned it, it's not nice to have, it's central to how an organization should behave. That's why it's important.
Thanks. And what are the intended and unintended consequences that you foresee acknowledging challenges of DEI and sustainability?
Well, that's actually a very, very good question because intended and unintended consequences is I guess a pitfall, and this is something which I'm always aware of, right? When we actually set targets, 30%. Now the danger is it becomes a box ticking exercise. In other words, companies and corporates, they don't really appreciate the true value of DEI. And therefore, it's box ticking. I've met, and this happens, right? You can see board composition, more than 30%. But senior management, hardly one, right? So maybe 1 out of 15 or whatever. So you see that. Now, this is the thing which I worry about. When it becomes a box ticking exercise, and companies don't appreciate it, then it doesn't really mean anything. So if you have 30% composition, but somehow the women directors' views are not heard of. So in other words, respect of diversity of thought of views are not actually something which is safeguarded in a board, then you fail that. And this is where the chairperson is important. They have to make sure that the people, everyone's views are respected, including the composition, right? Another pitfall is, of course, we talked about in the previous panel about merit, the pitfall here is that I put somebody on to box stick and then it may not have the right merit. That also happens, but we all know that, when it comes to merit, first of all, merit is a wide range, right? CVs are wonderful, but it could be single gender, but within that, that some person is right and some person is not right. So it's a bit more holistic than that. So this thing about merit, I think if we actually look at our teams, we can actually find the right mix. I don't think that would be next year. You can still have merit first, but be able to meet it. And that really comes down to, this thing which was talked about before, about trust. And like it or not, top managers, especially leading in large organizations, it's much simpler to create certain rules at the top, policies and procedures, okay, because everyone will have to follow. But when you do that, it's exactly like how Dato Amy described the bicycle, scenario, where you're actually putting a standard set of policies and procedures and giving everyone the same size bike. Whereas it's harder and perhaps more appropriate that we tailor to our workforce and understand the different facets of our workforce as well. Now that's, I guess, one of these things about unintended consequences. We just try to do it, but we don't think through it, and we don't make an effort to really harness the true value. Remember, when we actually come out with DEI policies and having we talked about equity versus equality, right? To be more equitable, what we are doing is we are trying to create a workforce that can perform to the best potential. And each and every one of us are different. So we have to make sure that the policies are flexible enough so everyone can actually perform. Yeah.
Thanks. It's interesting that we discussed about merit-based recruitment in the first panel discussion, and you mentioned that now. And I agree with what Kish mentioned earlier as well. Merit-based is very loose term used. What we realized that helps in diversity hire, whether it's gender, age, background, is looking beyond the job scope. So a lot of JDs, I used to joke, is on the shelf, has to be dusted and cleaned. It doesn't evolve with the current changes in the market, the business objectives, the environment that has changed. Now you have digital, but the JD doesn't change. And when the interview continues to be based on the JD, merit is also defined mainly based on a set of technical competencies, not the approach to a situation, not approach to a problem solving. Then most of the time, the minorities drop out because you don't assess for the approach, right? You tick the box for technical competencies. Thank you, Dato. I'm going back to Dr. Hasnita, back on the point that she mentioned about the gender pay gap. And I'm tying up with 2 points. One is in 2019, we did a study together with Center for Creative Leadership, rated top 10 business school by Financial Times, on barriers women leaders face in Asia Pacific. And one point that came up, which further confirmed global studies, is that women find it difficult to negotiate for a salary rise. They find it easier to negotiate and stand by for their team. But when it comes to negotiating their own salary increase, they find it difficult, and there's a double-edged sword there. If they do stand up and ask for a salary increase, then they're seen as being self-centered or being obnoxious. But I'm also taking another question here, which ties in with that. It says, I like, and the person's name is anonymous attendee. In the world of diversity, inclusion, and equity, I encourage visibility. So it'd be good that we post our names there and share our thoughts. But again, the point here is, I like Dr. Hasnita's sentence on women advocating on their own behalf. In your opinion, what could improve the situation beside getting the men involved? Should there be enforcement with legislation, for example? But my question to Dr. Hasnita is, when you look at the women that you have developed or worked with, how do they overcome this whole stigma of asking for a pay rise or for a promotion?
Maybe I can start with what are the systemic inequity issues that women face. I think there are at least 6. One is being treated equally, from being held to higher standards to facing persistent gender stereotypes. So we are systematically placed on an uneven playing field. This is called unconscious bias. So it makes it more difficult for women to climb to leadership positions. As I mentioned, the second one is advocating on our own behalf. In men, ambition is considered a strength, but you're right, in women, it's not necessarily a positive attitude, right? So this is one issue that we have to, get over. And we have to find that strength to do it ourselves and believe in ourselves. Thirdly, I think trusting our own voice. We have to push through internal and external barriers to find the confidence to express our ideas. Even at the board level, Dato Feisal mentioned that the box ticking exercise, there could be more than 30% women on board, but are their views being heard? The environment created, especially by chairmen of boards, has to be conducive that whether you're women or you're minority, in terms of race and whatever, is conducive for them to express their opinions. And the same with the leadership team. If in the exco is one person out of 12 is a woman, it's much more daunting. So the CEOs and the board have to be conscious of this and address that imbalance. The fourth thing is building alliances. Men have long-standing business conventions that help them to build alliances and influence others. They go to the same school, they talk about football, they talk about golf, So it's very hard to contribute. Maybe golf, women can do that, but football, we don't know, Manchester United, Arsenal, whatever, it doesn't mean anything to us. So we have to find alternate routes to build mutually beneficial alliances and strategic relationships. So what women can do is to seek out strong leadership mentors and coaches. I think Dato Amy mentioned at a recent conference that it takes a village to put a woman on board. Men, they have friends and they can easily get, promoted to different boards by their alliances. Fifthly, is the imposter syndrome. When you're faced with this systemic gender bias and inequality, women often have difficulty in forming their own self-assessment. And situation called imposter syndrome. I mean, I went through it myself when I was doing my PhD. Somebody recently asked me, actually, I was in Dubai at the weekend. Somebody asked me, you have a PhD in nuclear physics. Why didn't you continue? I said, I felt like an imposter. Where I was the only woman there, and all these men, I didn't feel that I was clever enough, so I better leave before somebody finds out that I don't know anything. So, but this is something that we have to train, our employees, to give them the confidence, give them the opportunity to build their confidence. For example, the board in Maybank, we often ask for the head of the business units to let their second or third liners come and present to the board. It's very daunting for them, but it's good training. So, that so that they can stand confidently with their accomplishments. I think finally is a balancing of the, family life and work. I think the option to work remotely is especially important for women. That is the upside of what happened during the pandemic. So we get less burnout. We're much happier in our work, and we like to have that flexibility and prefer companies that are committed to DEI. So that's my opinion on this.
Thank you, Dr. Hasnita. We will move to the second segment, more towards the systemic changes that we talked about earlier. So following on with Dr. Hasnita, to ensure long-term sustainable outcome from DEI, leadership development or HR benefits, family-friendly facilities alone will not help unless a systemic organizational change is done to remove inherent biases and improve ways the company attracts, retains, and develops talents. What is the role of the board in driving DEI in the organization if a deeper change is necessary? We know the tone from the top is important, but the tone shouldn't be choppy when it goes down the organization. So what is the role of the board in driving DEI if a deeper change is necessary?
Okay. Equity is a continuous process, as we heard, and it requires power, resources, and social responsibility to work hand in hand. It's the glue that holds diversity and inclusion together. So the board has an extremely important role to play because it has the power, it has access to resources, and it has a social responsibility. So again, tone from the top is very important. So for example, in Maybank, we have a diverse composition in terms of gender and race. But to build equity, the board must make a conscious decision in terms of, so for example, in Maybank main board, every member has to chair a subsidiary. Through the NRC, we have to make sure that whoever chairs a subsidiary, is selected based on, what they can contribute rather than whether you're a man or woman or, different race and so on. And to give equal opportunity for board members to have the exposure. Again, on the board level, we the views of the diverse board members should be welcomed and appreciated, no matter what gender and race they are. We have also established a board sustainability committee, of which I'm a member, to oversee, all sustainability governance targets, including DEI across the group. I would say, in terms of driving this agenda, the biggest help to the board will be through the nomination and remuneration committee. Again, I'm on that committee as well. We have to be serious in improving workplace equity and take a serious look at the workforce and our leadership. And if necessary, leadership changes should be made to reflect that commitment to diversity and inclusion, looking at the EXCO level, the succession planning, and so on, and to give, equitable opportunities to everyone. Of course, a good place to start, an important place to start is the pay and salary. NRC can make sure to note and monitor that women are getting as many promotions or raises as their male counterpart when they're doing the same job. In Maybank, we make a very conscious decision that all the EXCO members, all EXCO positions have the same salary, because it should be, that position should be able to be filled by anybody at that level. So we're not looking at differentiating the job scope so everyone gets paid the same. It's important to have transparent discussions around salaries and employee performance, position, and pay rate, and assessing how promotions are made and who are getting promoted, so there's fairness and equity in the process. The other thing is in terms of sourcing for candidates, whether it's for board positions or employees. If we're using the same sources and channels, we could be attracting the same type of applicants over and over again. If we're hiring or promoting people belonging to a certain demographic, then we have to examine the criteria that we use to define an ideal leader or employee. The board interview panel is important in terms of the reflection on diversity, so there's a fair representation and different perspectives. And how do we bring in a more diverse pool of talent? One way could be adopting a skills-based hiring model. As not every person has the same access to the same opportunities, such as top-tier university education. I think Dato Feisal talked a bit about that as well. So I think these are some of the things that the board and board committees can do to ensure that we are really pushing the DEI agenda.
And Dato Feisal, what do you envisage to be the role of the board in driving DEI within the Khazanah context? And will DEI KPIs be tied to performance in Khazanah and investee companies?
Right. Thanks. Thanks, Raj. I was listening to Dr. Hasnita, and she was in my previous organization. Of course, she was my board member. So So I do appreciate it, and I think you know, most of Khazanah companies are it's a journey, right? It's a journey, and some are more advanced than others. I think having been in Maybank before, clearly it's quite one of those that are well advanced. And I think that's the case because if the board truly believes in it, through the board and RC, they're the ones who actually tell management, show me your plans, what's the matrix. When you look at the composition of the individual ExCo members or senior management team, how is the composition? So when you have board members asking those questions and asking it to be reported at the board, whether it's a BNRC, then things will change. But you have to do it. You have to actually look at it. Even the board itself, the board NRC would have to look at the composition when it comes to gender diversity, when it comes to all aspects, right? We have the matrix, and we actually monitor the matrix in terms of the skill sets, the diversity, what it can contribute, because it's that's what makes a very strong and effective board. And that has to translate to management and policies and through the board NRC initially. But I think it mustn't really stop at the board function or committee level. I think this is where the board can actually do a bit more as they get to know the company. They can, like Dr. Hasnita mentioned in Maybank, you know, they are also chairpersons of the subsidiaries, for example, and they actually play a role there. In some cases, you can actually start engaging. You can have engagement with not just the ExCo, but below that as well. And through that engagement, you can actually try to perhaps foster and be an ally to women as well. So that's something that you want to also start to make sure that it goes below just the top. You know, sometimes the problem is just the top, you know, that could be the problem. So you want to be able to go below that. A constant pressure at the board, and even below that where we actually try to promote it. And I actually like what Jaya mentioned in the last session, which is it's about the journey. And as you go about doing it and putting in policies, the revelation will come. The so-called character, the color, the diversity, or the value of the workforce of the organization starts to come out in light. And when you see that, then I guess, you know, I've seen this in some organizations where you actually get very, very proud of the workforce that you have. And I think that's part of the journey where, you know, and it is a tone from the top, but, you know, if it's not happening, you have to go down below, you have to keep on doing it. And you have to keep on emphasizing it and continue and continue and continue. We at the shareholder level will be saying it as well, right? Where we have KPIs and we have sustainability frameworks, and we're going to continue speaking that. We have nominee directors on the board, and we will try to make sure that the voice gets heard. But the board themselves, it's less, you know, I'm always wary about KPIs because then it becomes a box ticking exercise. But it has to be more than that. It's building that culture. I think is important. And yeah, it's being, you know, not a nice to have, but making it part of the central to the organization.
Now, what would your advice be? And this actually happened about more than a year ago. I had a conversation with the CEO of a listed company who happened to attend our roundtables on DEI, and he said, "It ain't broken, why fix it?" You know, why all this fuss about women and diversity? Just run the show, make some money for the company, right? What's your message to CEOs of these listed companies who apparently are doing well in terms of probably profitability, but if ain't broken, why fix it?
Well, when you have that statement, "It ain't broken, why fix it?" then the sight of view of that person is only today. And that's a danger. If you're actually a CEO of an organization and your view of the organization is today, but not the future, then it becomes a problem for us as a shareholder.
True.
I think we mentioned in our expectations, it's about the long-term sustainability of the business. And we all know that today, things are changing rapidly. When you look at the mega trends, when it comes to, you know, when it comes to technology, how people are working, you know, income inequality, geopolitics, everything is changing rapidly. And a lot of people here, I'm sure, have tried ChatGPT, right? And we look at ChatGPT, then you can try to imagine the type of workforce which will be automated in the future. So how are you going to nurture your talent going forward? So when you actually look at this from that perspective, having that single short-sightedness, it won't work. It won't work. And forcing the board, forcing management to really have that long-term value creation, the sustainability. I mean, I talk about it generally, of course. DEI is one component because that's who we're serving, right? As most organizations serving, right? The tastes are different. The people are bringing, it continues to evolve. You have to keep sight on that as you build your strategy for the company. So that's what I would say to the person. I think I do have an issue with that because it's being fairly short-sighted.
Very true. And what are some of Khazanah's priorities and strategies in meeting your ambition of 30% women on boards and management team?
Sorry, can you repeat that? It was quite soft, very close.
What are some of your Khazanah's priorities and strategies in meeting your ambition of achieving 30% women on boards and management team?
Well, I think when you look at strategies in doing so, it is about making sure that we have the right talent pool to be able to capture this, to be able to meet this. And even for us in Khazanah, I mean, I'll just share with you Khazanah as a company as opposed to boards, right? It's important that we actually look at the composition even at the junior rungs. Looking at the junior rungs as they go up the ranks, to middle management, to senior management, etc., and monitoring the mix and see where it might tail off a bit. Where suddenly you have higher than normal attrition for a particular gender group, and appreciating that, then we can try to see, well, why is that? Is there a way that we can actually retain the workforce in our organization because of a certain matters? Whether it's it could be family, right? It could be because of family, they want to spend more time with family. And if that is the case, then how can we make this, this workplace to help them, to basically help them to have more time working from home? If it's not working from home, do they need time off? Those are the things that we have to look at. I think in Maybank, they're actually quite good in this in terms of sabbaticals. But then we look at what about board members, Then most of the times it's about opportunities. They are very, very capable middle management, senior management. Not at Maybank, my previous organization, the senior management team, once there's an opportunity for them to sit on other boards, will encourage that because then they get experience, right? In some cases, they can't be on a corporate board. It could be a foundation or something like that. But again, it's being proactive to make sure that the pipeline of people are there, to make sure that everyone gets an opportunity. And then of course, when you actually have that criteria to meet it, then the board NRC of companies will actually go to great lengths to identify this pool of talent and making sure that they do give the opportunity. So it's a question of wanting to look for it, being proactive and actually finding them, but also making sure that there's actually a good pipeline and support to ensure that we have more people that are qualified.
Thank you, Dato. And to Dr. Hasnita, there are two schools of thoughts from women leaders. One saying, why all the fuss about gender equality? This is from women leaders. Why all the fuss about gender equality? There's no glass ceiling, just work for it. And the other saying that there needs to be concerted effort to progress women to the top. What is your view, Dr. Hasnita? My view is that definitely there is a glass ceiling. I mean, it can be broken, but it needs a lot of support from, if we're talking about gender, from the male allies and also the females. We need to support each other, and break through that glass ceiling. I mean, getting to, wherever I am right now has not been an easy journey. It started about 40 years ago when nobody even thought about the word equity. So through my own personal experience, I know that there is that glass ceiling which can be broken through, but having that ally, whether it's male, female, is very important. Interesting. Now, from your perspective, there are many friends of mine and also fellow male allies who are joining this program. They're keen to know how can they support their female colleagues to rise to the top. From your experience, how have male allies around you supported in your progress?
Well, I worked a lot in the Middle East, 30 years ago. I was one of the very few women working there. It was very difficult to do business in the Middle East as a woman. But I think, for example, like I had a meeting with the chairman of a company, and he wanted to meet in the restaurant of his, in the cafe of his building, but no women ever stepped foot into that restaurant before. But he made an exception, and said, okay, let's go meet there. So I mean, these are small anecdotal experience that I've gone through. But there, if you have a self-belief and confidence and believe in what you do, having that those small steps taken by your male colleagues and given the opportunity, I think that would be very helpful, and a lot of understanding of what we have to go through to be seen and being given a level playing field.
Okay. I'm mindful of the time. We are coming close to the end of the session. The last question to Dato Amirul is on what leadership qualities to drive performance. Without stereotyping gender and arguing that one gender is better than the other, what leadership qualities for both men and women leaders that would be more appropriate to drive business imperatives of both public and private sectors?
All right. Okay. There's that. This is like a session on its own, but anyway, I think one thing that I can, there's a lot of leadership qualities, I think, when you actually look at how we want to guide ourselves. But what I'm going to turn to is basically how, this is internally within Khazanah, where there are some leadership qualities that we actually try to nurture our teams towards. In fact, we get evaluated based on that as well. So when it comes to that self-awareness and mutual respect, that's quite key. The ability to grow, the learning agility and adaptability of a person is also part of that leadership. Forming teams, collaborating and partnership as well, empowering and developing others, and then having that drive, driving high performance. I mean, those are things where you are a leader. You are not a fighter pilot flying your own plane, but you're actually bringing along a large organization in order to follow you. And therefore that self-awareness, appreciating others, empowering others, giving them opportunities becomes absolutely key.
Thank you, Dato. One last question, Dato, before I hand over to Farah. It's an interesting question from another Mr. or Miss Anonymous attendee. It supports men, right? Do you think men face imposter syndrome issue too? With all this awareness and actions being in place, are we progressing or regressing when it comes to DEI? But let's look at the first question. Do you think men face imposter syndrome as well?
My honest feeling is no. I don't think so. And I think, it's actually quite interesting you say that, because if I look at what we're doing in terms of DEI, when we say 30%, etc., to be honest with you, 30% is a minimum. I mean, let's face it. And we actually look at the customer base that we have, it should be a lot more than that. So when we look at what we're doing in terms of bringing this up, and to suddenly say 30%, oh, that's too much, and I feel like an imposter, I don't think so. I think we can do a lot more than the minimum. 30 is just minimum.
Thank you, Dato. So we come to the end of the session of today's DEI conversation. Thank you to Dr. Hasnita and Dato Feisal. Hope to continue the engagement post this event. And Dato Feisal, 30% Club, we're happy to support you in filling up your board positions. We have got very active graduates from the board mentoring program. A quick commercial break here. Thank you. Thank you, Farah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Raj.